What's good, mi gente? Welcome back. It's your boy Raul. Today we got a special episode of Spotlight where I have a guest coming all the way from Denver, Colorado, Jon Marcantoni. He is also the director of Flamboyán Theatre in Denver, Colorado. So, welcome to the show, John.
Hey, thanks for having me on. And I really appreciate you guys highlighting our theater.
No, thank you so much. And for those who don't know, you guys might have already heard John's episode earlier this week. So he's already been a guest on my How Do You Say Success in Spanish podcast, and we wanted to get him up here to spot and give a little spotlight on the Flamboyant Theater in Puerto Rico. So I just kind of to start off for those who might not have heard the podcast episode, can you give me a quick little introduction about who John Marcantoni is?
Yeah, I established Flamboyant Theater back in 2022 after the production of my play Puerto Rican Nocturne, which was about the Sacra Maravilla murders and scandal in Puerto Rico. We got such an enormous outpouring of support from Puerto Ricans here in Denver who are simply not represented. There's just not a cultural space for us here, and so the creation of Flamboyant, um, it didn't start out as being specifically Puerto Rican, but is evolved into that because ultimately that's where my heart is, that's where my passion is, and I want to make a change here where Puerto Rican culture, we're the second largest Latino group in Colorado. And so I want to make it where Puerto Rican culture is represented here and that we have a place to celebrate ourselves.
Nice, awesome. Yeah, and I mean, I think the first thing people don't think about when they think of Denver, Colorado, is Puerto Ricans. So it's kind of awesome to actually hear that you guys make up such a big representation over there in for the Latino community. And so as far as the theater goes, like, what are some of the goals that you guys the theater likes to have?
Well, one of the biggest goals because we have our emerging playwrights project, which is meant to develop up and coming writers, both as artists and also as business people, teaching the business side of theater and also the media engagement and social media engagement, all that kind of thing, so that they have the tools to produce their own work. It's going along with the uh, give a man a fish versus teach a man a fish kind of philosophy, and and so and so that's one of our goals is to make that a continuing program, and develop some new writers and some new Puerto Rican theater here in Denver, establish a home for ourselves. But the larger goal is to connect Flamboyant with Puerto Rican communities throughout the U.S. and ultimately in Puerto Rico, make a presence for ourselves in Puerto Rico, and show that Puerto Rican voices are not confined to any one place or any one community. We can be global.
Yeah, yeah. And what's the reception been like so far for you guys, especially from like the Puerto Rican community?
Man, it's been so incredibly positive. One of your previous guests, George Torres from Daily Sofrito, he in the Siembra Academy, he wrote about us for his blog, has shared our stories, has promoted us on his own channels, been incredibly generous. Julio Ricardo Varela, the founder of Latino Rebels, who I used to work for, he has been incredibly generous with his time, also wrote about us, and has also spread the word about our theater. Then there's also been Dio Louis, who's a big figure in the New York Latino art scene, and has been a mentor of mine for many years. He's also been plugging the plugging the theater and all of his channels. I've been in touch with El Centro, the Center for Puerto Rican Studies. They've been really enthusiastic about us, as has the Instituto de Cultura on the island. So the response outside of Colorado has been very positive, and then inside Colorado has been just as enthusiastic. It's been really, really promising. I mean, one of the things that has happened since putting out this mission and putting out our goals publicly has been a lot of Puerto Ricans coming out of the woodwork here. Um, those who work in city government, those who have businesses here, people just involved in non-arts related activities, just like wanting to know more about us, wanting to follow us, and and expressing interest in our upcoming events this summer, which include a release party for our narrative podcasts that we made, and also a production of our play Empire of Solitude in August. It's been all love. It's been so much positivity, and it's just really been exciting.
Nice, that's awesome. I'm glad to see so much positivity coming your way, man. Especially when you're trying to do something so positive as well. So having positive come with positive is always great. And so, obviously there's some gaps that occur in the arts industry that I think you're hoping to Flamboyant be able to fill in. What are some of those gaps that you guys are hoping to be able to help with?
Mhm. Well, there is a well-established Chicano theater scene here, and of course, Su Teatro, which has an international recognition themselves. They all my interactions with them, they've been very supportive, but they are a Chicano theater. It's their lane, and they have created a style that has very deep roots here in the city, um, which is all great. I'm not saying anything negative about that. What is negative, however, and outside of their control, but what has been negative is that the Chicano movement has been so successful here in Denver, it has blotted out, unintentionally, blotted out every other Latino culture, which is why we don't have a foothold, which is why, there's the Mexican Cultural Center, and there's the Latino Center for the Arts, which is entirely Mexican centric. And, uh, there's city holidays for Cesar Chavez, and there's monuments to Chicano history and all of that. But there's also a large Guatemalan population here that gets largely ignored. There's a large Venezuelan population, Argentinian, and then us. Uh, so so there's a lot of work that needs to be done to educate white people that Mexico is not the only Latin American country, which is not a solely Denver problem. That is all over the US.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who grew up Peruvian, who was confused for everything but Peruvian, underrepresentation
Yeah.
is always an
Mm,
issue, especially when you're places that are predominantly, one country more than the other. I grew up in New England, in Rhode
mhm.
Island, close enough to New York, where the majority of people were either Puerto Rican or Dominican, and so that was like 99% of the guests. If you guess where I'm from, it's going to be that, one or the other.
Right.
So obviously, being underrepresented is difficult in wherever you're at. And so that
Yeah.
being said, what is it about Puerto Rican stories that you feel is important that you guys are trying to portray?
Mhm. Well, I think the biggest thing for me is getting uh, getting Puerto Rican stories made that don't stick to the preordained boxes that Latino entertainment already puts you in. Because those boxes are stifling for everyone. But with Puerto Ricans, it's particularly unique because we don't have the same relationship with the United States that the rest of Latin America has. Our colonial status and our very antagonistic history with the U.S. Puts us in a different place. You know, it's like our if we do an immigration centered story, um, you know, it's not going to be really positive in the same way that one of someone from another Latin American country, like say like in El Salvador, in and what white audiences expect from Latinos is this ardent desire to achieve the American dream, and that the American dream is like the pinnacle of human existence. And the United States is the greatest country on earth, and there's a lot of that undercurrent. You know, even with Latino arts that are critical of the U.S., there's still kind of the sense of wanting to belong here. Whereas so much of the Puerto Rican story is conflict over that. You know, there and it runs the whole gamut from people who are very assimilationist and do want to be a part of the U.S. and they're what we call estadistas, people that want Puerto Rico to be a state, and then there are everybody else who wants some degree of autonomy. And part of the difficulty in getting progress in Puerto Rico has been figuring out what that level of autonomy is. Whether it's the free state status that it currently has, or whether it's independence, or something in between. And we can't agree on any of it. But regardless, um, that story is not a story you normally would get from a Latino. And so it's very important for us to have plays and have movies, have books that cover those thorny subjects. It's also important, though, to have stories where being Puerto Rican is just an element. Like the character is Puerto Rican, but the story is not about them being Puerto Rican. It's really important that we tell stories in all genres, and that we show that, like, this is this is a Puerto Rican artist making a cop drama, making a romantic comedy, making just a straight comedy, making something like absurdist, like an Anchorman or something. Like we should be able to do that, and I feel that way too about all BIPOC groups. Like our humanity needs to not be limited in any sort of way, and that's a very and getting rid of that limitation and changing the narrative about who we are and what our humanity contains is very central to the work that I'm doing. It is at the forefront of my mind when I'm selecting material, and also when I myself am writing. I grew up loving gangster movies, loving them. All right, like all the mob movies, Goodfellas, Godfathers of the world, but also ones that most people haven't even heard of, like Once Upon a Time in America, or ones that are a little more notorious, like a Scarface.
Hmm.
You know, and then of course like all the black gangster movies from the '90s, where there was Hoodlum, Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society, Juice, what have you. I love all of those. And so I want to be able to tell those stories because it's what I enjoy. It's the genre that I really enjoy. And I when I was writing novels, like I did do that. Like I wrote a book called Feast of San Sebastian, which was about human trafficking in Puerto Rico. It was kind of this like crime noir. But in writing that, let me tell you, I got so much pushback from white editors and white publishers. I was told I needed to make it a Mexican story, like set it in like East LA or something. Or my favorite, and I say favorite with sarcasm, my favorite thing that anyone ever told me, which was that I needed to make my characters race neutral. And by race neutral, I was like, what do you mean race neutral? I said, well, like general Latino. Can you make them general Latino?
Yeah, it's the evolving, culturally, ethnically, ambiguous. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah.
Exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. You know, so I got a lot of pushback from that. I mean, and I did eventually find people who were willing to support that book, and that book was successful. But it was very difficult. It really was going uphill. And we live in a time right now where we're bringing in diverse artists and allowing them to express themselves more fully is becoming more and more acceptable in this country, which is wonderful. Uh, it's been a lot of progress in 20 years, but you know, that's the kind of thing that's in the forefront of my mind when I'm looking to mentor or produce a writer's work. I really want to see that like they're thinking outside the box and that they're not limiting themselves, because like that brainwashing, like part of the reason why we're stuck in that box is because so many Latino writers go along with it, you know, in order to eat. I mean, in order to pay bills. Like I'm not knocking those people. There's reasons to do it, but it's also perpetuating the cycle rather than breaking it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. No, I mean, it's they like to paint us with a broad brush sometimes, and
Hmm.
being able to recognize that, and not just recognize it, but also say, hey, I want to try to do something different. I want to stick out a
Hmm.
little bit. It is
Yeah.
important. And you're right. With Puerto Ricans, it's compared to a lot of other Latin American countries, we've all gone through, all of our countries have gone through their own level of shit compared to like other countries or whatever. But Puerto Ricans are very unique for Latin America in what's going on and how you guys are done, and even to this point where you guys are still, you're a Commonwealth of the United States instead of an independent country like a lot of the other countries. So you guys have some differences and things that people sometimes don't recognize. And it's my wife. My wife's Puerto Rican, so people will sometimes yell at her and tell her to go back to her country, and she's like, "I'm here. what more do you want from me?" So yeah, it's good that you guys, are able to present that thing, present that point of view, and I think it's very important to be able to do that, because I think we do sometimes forget about that stuff. And so I know you guys do a lot of different projects, and you started talking a little bit about, I think, the Emerging Playwrights Project. You guys also
Hmm.
do a lot of other stuff. Can you tell me a little bit about Emerging Playwrights, and then we'll kind of maybe dig into some of the other ones as well?
Absolutely. So the Emerging Playwrights Project is a mentorship program that I spent much of last year trying to refine, and then this year I think we're in a really good place with it. It is a program where we find a well, we have a particular theme for this year. So this year it's Western Boricuas. So we sought out writers from the American West. We actually ended up with two writers from California, and uh, highlighting their stories. And in fact, at on August 18th, we're going to have our finale event for the Emerging Playwrights Project, which will include a panel talking about the experience of being Puerto Rican in the West, as opposed to the depiction that most people think of, which are New Yorkers. Um, and just talking about the particular cultural mixing and the cultural influences that you get being here rather than closer to Puerto Rico. So that's the theme for this year, and the writers that we selected, Bailey and Alejandro, their works are radically different. I mean, Bailey, hers is kind of a horror comedy, has a really neat premise.
Nice.
And then Alejandro wrote this kind of musical spectacular that also has like elements of drag theater to it. That you know the but it's also like telling the true story of a Puerto Rican singer. It's really, really fascinating and experimental and wild, just absolutely
Nice.
wild. But it follows with what I was just saying about trying to find stories that don't fit the normal box.
Yeah.
So I assigned mentors to Alejandro and Bailey, and those mentors are well experienced playwrights. Uh, Brian Keith Wilson, he's a playwright in the New York area, and Christina Bejan, who is based here in Denver. But she's a Romanian playwright and actually has had like her work produced in Romania as well as in DC. And so those are the mentors that we got for this session. And they're working with Bailey and Alejandro on refining their scripts and developing them. In Alejandro's case, he's trying to take what was a 10-minute play into being full length, which carries a lot of challenges. So while the mentors are working with them on that, I filmed with a director named Marcus Essen. He filmed me doing these classes where the classes talk about writing for the stage, but they also talk about marketing, branding, making your budget, making media contacts, also, and what I feel is most importantly, also talking about we how we present ourselves in the world, how we come across as writers, the kind of focus that we have in our branding that doesn't compromise who we are as people, keeping that public private divide, and remembering that you're a human being, you're not a commodity. You might be being used as a commodity by some people, but you yourself are not a commodity. Your humanity always comes first, and that's a key component to the program. So by giving them a creative mentorship as well as a professional development mentorship, the idea is that by the time the program ends, they have the basic tools for producing their own work. And because I feel that one of the one of the problems with theater is that the writer is so essential to making a story happen, but their role is entirely passive. The way that things are set up, a writer, their only option for getting produced is they just have to submit it. They have to submit their script to festivals. They have to submit their script to competitions. They can submit their script sometimes directly to theaters. Sometimes they have to get an agent to submit a script for them. But in all these things, they are passive. They're just submitting and waiting and just hoping that somebody believes in them. And that allows for gatekeepers to dictate what gets produced and what doesn't get produced. And more often than not, that's very detrimental to people of color.
Nice.
So my philosophy that started this program
Hmm.
is we writers need to take initiative. We have the intellectual property. Our writing is intellectual property. So we need to take charge. We need to show that we have power and we have say in getting our stories told and how we get them told. And another part of the mentorship is talking about like, hey, even though you are being a writer producer and you're taking some more initiative, collaboration is the only way that theater gets made. There is humility that you have to bring to the table. Um, there is the respect that you need to pay to the other craftspeople involved in making your show happen, and in working with a director in a way that that you allow them the space to have their own vision and to execute that vision. And so it's not just that writers have to change the way that they approach the industry, but also they have to change the way that they view their own work and the possessiveness that oftentimes writers will have about their work. One thing that I say in one of these videos is that if you want 100% full control of your vision, be a poet, be a novelist, don't be a playwright. And by extension, don't be a screenwriter either.
Yeah.
Like screenwriters and playwrights will have their work fucked with more than any other writer. And so if you're going to be choosing this medium, you have to be willing to collaborate. You have to be willing to compromise on certain things. And one of the beautiful things about theater is that it can be produced an endless amount of times. So, like, even if you have problems with one production of your work, there can always be another production. And that's actually kind of the real beauty of playwriting is that it adapts and changes in that way. So yeah, so that's the program itself. I'm always kind of tinkering away at it, and I'm kind of wondering how I want it to manifest next year. I'm already kind of like thinking that, even though I don't want to. I already have enough things on my mind.
Yeah, yeah, it never stops, right? It never stops, right? So,
Yeah. But it's a program that has so much promise and can be applied in so many different areas, in so many different manifestations. It's like not to say that it's our bread and butter, but I think it is what really sets our theater apart from other theaters, because other theaters have, say, a new playwright workshop or a new playwright festival, which is just a reading. And yes, the writers get feedback, which is important, but they're not getting the professional development, and that's the component that Flamboyant is offering.
yeah, no, that's awesome, man. I'm, like you said, it's always a work in progress. Next year, and you keep growing, you get better, and I wish you guys, all the best on that. I know some of the other things you guys do. You guys do have plays that you guys actually have there. Can you tell me some of the plays that you guys have?
Yeah, so our play Empire of Solitude, which I wrote, is about the last days of Julia de Burgos. It is a celebration of her writing. It is also a deep dive into the effects of misogyny. And, Julia de Burgos was very autobiographical in her writing and so beautifully expressed the struggle of being a woman in the world. And one of the things when you read her writing, because she was writing in the from the mid to late 1930s to 1953, and so you're reading these 70, 80, 90-year-old poems, and it's like they were written today. The concerns, the trials and tribulations that she writes about, it's the same stuff that's going on with women now. And so her story just has a real relevance and resonance in today, in what's going on today. And so really excited about getting that play out there. And then there's Denise, which is written by Denise Subisarreta. She's a Puerto Rican Cuban writer. And she, like myself, I'm an Army veteran. Denise is a Navy veteran, and she served at Guantanamo Bay in like I think it was 2002, 2003 when she was there. So right after 9/11, and and how that experience affected her marriage. It's a very powerful play. It's a very difficult play. It deals with, sexual assault in the army, or not in the army, in the military. It deals with, addiction and suicide, and it's a very heavy show, but it is an experience that I think, unfortunately, far too many women have experienced, and so Denise and Empire of Solitude were recorded as podcasts, narrative podcasts, which we are in the midst of editing right now. We recorded them back in late March, early April,
Oh, nice.
and they're going to be released on June 23rd. We're going to have a big release party, in Denver at one of our partners' establishments, Raices Brewery, which is it was the first Puerto Rican-owned brewery in the U.S. to be run by a woman, Tamia Maldonado, and and they have been an incredible partner for Flamboyán. They have donated their space for events like on June 23rd and also August 18th. We did some of our auditions there. We did we did the rehearsals for the podcast there. Um, they've just been such a great partner, and in what I was talking about earlier with kind of like the landscape of what's going on in Denver and like where we're kind of filling in. Raices, they present themselves as being pan Latino. They try to celebrate all the Latin American cultures. Actually, they have celebrations for all of the Independence Days, not only of not only of Spanish speaking Latin America, but also Independence Day for Haiti, for Jamaica, for
Nice.
Brazil. They celebrate all those things, and
Hmm.
they try to highlight all the different Latino cultures. And in many cases, they're the only place in Denver where those cultures get any kind of notice. And so they're partners in my mission too. You know, we're all on the same team. And also Boricuas Unidos en la Diaspora is another partner of ours. They're a pro-independence organization that is doing great civil rights work for Puerto Ricans all over the country and in Puerto Rico. And we're very honored to be partnering with them as well. So they at the June 23rd event for the release party, they will be present it's going to be kind of our coming out party as an organization working with these partners and with the community in this way. Then in August, at Buntport Theatre, which is close to downtown Denver, we will be doing a theatrical production of Empire of Solitude. So I'm very excited about that. Our director, Natalie Cortez, also directed the podcast for Empire, and we're in the midst of casting that right now. So really exciting things coming up.
That's awesome, man. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to see all the involvement with all the different organizations, and finding out there's a Puerto Rican based brewery. All that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Really cool, man. I'm glad you guys are getting some help, and people are really stepping it up with you guys. So I guess.
Okay, I'm sorry. I want to say one other thing.
Sure.
Your show has been like an enormous source
Oh.
for this because recently you had on Mike from Fincasa Whiskey.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I reached out to Mike because I love this story, and Fincasa Whiskey will also be present at
Nice.
that event in June.
Awesome.
He was kind enough to donate some bottles
Oh,
to
awesome. That's awesome, man.
very,
I'm
very
glad. I'm glad to hear, man. I'm glad that there's some reach happening. So I appreciate that, and I'm glad to hear the stories like that, dude. So, so I guess a question for you is, how can people help? Can people help financially, volunteeringly? What can people do to help Flamboyant?
well, yeah. If you're in the Denver area and you want to help us with any of our shows, I mean, whether it's handing out flyers, helping us with our selling our merch. We have we're going to have some shirts and other merchandise that we're going to be selling at the Empire of Solitude shows. Um, Also, at our Empire of Solitude show, we're going to premiere our Flamboyant Bazaar, which is our sort of market that will be set up uh, in the lobby and front area of Buntport Theatre for Latino companies to have a presence to sell their goods, for artists to sell their goods, And so having some help with that would be amazing. Also, at these events, anybody who's willing to help us with setting things up, or like with sets or resources like that. There is also, of course, uh, so the June 23rd event is acting as a fundraiser, for Flamboyán and also for Boricuas, and so anybody who can help us with selling tickets for that event, marketing that event, that would be really wonderful. And if you're not in the Denver area and you're not in Colorado, we do have a continuing GoFundMe campaign, that people can donate to. All the proceeds go to our actors and also to our writers in the Emerging Playwrights Project.
Very good. Nice. That's awesome, man. And so, and I guess, how can people follow you guys? Where are you guys? Are you Facebook, socials, websites that people can learn more about Flamboyant?
Yeah, so we are primarily on Instagram, at flamboyant_theater, and that's on Instagram because theater with an re was already taken. It's theater as we are,
Okay.
so it is what it is. But yeah, flamboyant_theater. Um, Follow us on there. Also, our website is flamboyanttheater.com. And the website, just to make things more confusing, it is RE. It's spelled with an RE. We do have a link tree, which you can access on our Instagram, and get access to all of our media interviews. Actually, the link to how to say success in Spanish will be added on there,
Nice.
once that episode airs. But also our interviews on the Espotlight podcast, was a wonderful Puerto Rican centric podcast that we were on, as well as articles that have been done about us, that I mentioned earlier. And it also has a link to our GoFundMe. So
Nice.
Linktree, Instagram. We also have a presence on LinkedIn, which has been an experiment. Um, uh, but yeah, I might put up like a Facebook event or something. I've honestly found that Facebook is not it's not the best place to advertise, and
Yeah.
and I kind of my experience with Facebook has been very blunting. I
Yeah.
feel like most people are on Instagram, most people are on TikTok.
Mm.
Um,
It, it's
yeah,
I don't want to make I don't want to make it sound like whatever, but it's like there's a certain age demographic that's more Facebook driven as opposed to like Instagram driven. So
yes,
it depends on the market you're looking for and who you're aiming for. That Facebook isn't always the best way to do it. So
yeah,
I completely get you, man. It's it's
yeah.
and by the way, I will have all your links on the
Mhm.
descriptions for all these the podcast and all the stuff as well. So anybody listening and watching, just look below and follow those links over there. So,
Mhm.
but John, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of let us put a little spotlight there on Flamboyant. And I really appreciate you. I'll give you a last second for anything you want to close off on. So,
Yeah, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. I cannot thank you enough. Your show has been just a complete blessing, and I hope more and more people keep watching. I hope your audience keeps expanding. And for anybody who's interested in working with Flamboyant, in whatever capacity, if you're wanting to become a sponsor, if you're wanting to volunteer for us, if you want to work with us, because we will be, as we approach the theatrical version of Empire, we will need a set designer, we will need a stage manager. So we are going to be hiring for those roles. So there's a lot of different opportunities, and also, um, me being forward thinking, I don't just see collaboration as being financial. And if there's any ways that I can highlight other businesses or I can highlight other people's services, I do. Are sometimes on our Instagram, I will promote another page, another Puerto Rican page, and just be like, hey, you guys should check this out. Or I want to highlight somebody in the community who's doing a lot of good things. I think that's as important to community building as anything else. So if you have a story you want us to highlight, if you have a business you'd like us to highlight, like hit us up. Check out our website and contact us through there or contact us through our Instagram.
Yep, yep. I'm a big proponent of the idea of all ships ride with the tide. So let's we'll lift each other up as we can. So thank you. Well,
Absolutely.
thank you, John. I really appreciate you taking the time. And it's I look forward to seeing what else you guys bring toward the table. So thank you. Yep. Yeah, and for everyone else listening, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to shine another spotlight on an organization like Flamboyán. You take care, and I'll talk to you guys next time.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, man.